These 5 hot takes, yeah!
Welcome back, everybody, to another interview episode, edition of Dave's 5 Hot Takes. I have my dear, dear friend Drew Holcomb on this episode. He brings his 5 hot takes, and they're hot. Drew is kind of one of the kings of the hot take. If you know Drew at all, you know that he has no problem expressing his opinion and feelings, which is one of my favorite things about him. And if you've seen him live, there's no way you left the show without feeling something. He is one of the most clear communicators playing music today. I think if you go and you've seen him, you left feeling something. He's such an amazing performer. His band, The Neighbors, are some of the most gifted players out on the road today. I have known Drew for forever. He's from Memphis, but we met when he was in school at UTK at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. He and my little brother, dear friends, they met there. He's friends with my sister. I've just known him forever. It feels like Drew's sort of always been in the background of my adult life. I remember Brad, my little brother, bringing his CD to me and saying, "Hey, you met my buddy Drew. He's starting this music thing," and being like, "Oh boy, okay, this guy, this guy may have something here." He is also one of my favorite people because he is by far, I think he may be my most entrepreneurial friend, which is a really bold thing to say, but it's true. He has his fingers in a million pies, and it seems like everything, he's got a bit of the Midas touch. Everything he touches seems to turn to gold, but he's had a bunch of records. He just had an album called Dragons that came out in August of 2019. It's amazing. A song off of it, Family, has already been on a million commercials. He has started something called the Moon River Festival that was in Memphis. It's now made its way down to Chattanooga. I got to play it a couple years ago. It's so much fun. He released something called Kitchen Covers during quarantine with his wife, Ellie Holcomb, who's just as wonderfully talented and amazing a person as he is. He's a part of a bourbon whiskey company with Peyton Manning and Andy Roddick. He has a Magnolia Record Club where he's released records every month that he sort of curates the list for. He's done a TED Talk that's on the internet. He's won an Emmy for a song of his called "Live Forever" that the NBA used that won in 2011. I mean, literally, Drew is everywhere. If you turn, everywhere you turn, he's there, which is, I love sitting and talking to him about life because he's living it. That's the way Drew sort of rolls. But he loves music like I love music. And when I thought of people I want to have on this podcast, Drew is one of the first I thought of. One, because he loves a hot take, and two, he loves music, and we talk about that in this interview. But I was thrilled to get him on, not only because I love him so much, but I knew that he would have a lot to say, and he did. And it was such a fun time. So without any further ado, y'all welcome Mr. Drew Holcomb to Dave's 5 Hot Takes. Okay, well, here we are. Another interview portion of Dave's 5 Hot Takes with the bearded, the wonderful, the handsome, the oft imitated but never duplicated, replicated Drew Holcomb. Welcome, Drew.
Hello, everybody. How's it going, man?
I'm sitting here looking. One of my favorite things that's happened this year, so there haven't been a lot of great things that have happened this year, but one of my favorite things that's happened is when you shaved your beard. And I've got a screenshot that I want to send you. I think I sent you of Huck, your second, your boy, eldest boy, looking at you. I caught it at the perfect time because you're laughing, and it must have been just like right as the water was getting everything into clean face, and his face behind you. He's like, who is this man?
Yes, it was awesome. Because the only reason I did that was because my oldest, Emmy Lou, was like, "Dad, I don't think I've never seen your face. I want to see your face." And she's been saying that for like maybe a year. And there's never been like a long enough break in my schedule to not have my main side situation here.
Yeah.
My calling card, if you will.
Yeah.
And so as soon as they announced the quarantine, I was like, well, now is definitely the time for that.
This is it. This is when we do it.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me, my friends who had beards for a long time, because you forget, like, you guys have
a face. Your
kids don't know your shaved face.
No, they don't. And so doing it on Instagram Live was really fun because, like, everybody's like, "What are we doing right now?" I'm watching a grown man shave. But I hadn't seen my own face in 12 years, so I was pretty curious too.
So okay, which this is a perfect segue. So we have known each other a really long time.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know when we actually met. Could you figure out the year that we would have met?
We met briefly when I was still in school in Knoxville. when, because, I went to school with Beth and Brad, your siblings. And so you were playing New City maybe. And
Yep.
Brad was, I went with Brad, and I think I was probably a senior. So I was probably 21 years old. So that would have been 2003 or 2002 or 3.
Yeah. I mean, it's a long time.
Yeah.
I think you were like one of my first experiences where a friend would, like Brad, or some acquaintance, but in this case, my brother said, "Hey, I've got this friend that's doing music. His name is Drew. You've met him. He's awesome." And I remember that being like, "Oh, I'm now like the guy, that people are going to be like, hey, check this." And
here's the CD.
Because I hadn't done that. I was never that. I was always the guy doing that. I was never the guy getting that. But since we've played a bajillion shows, still some of my favorite memories are that Christmas tour, first
so
Christmas
fun
tour.
Yeah.
There were so many parts of that tour. I was actually thinking about this the other day when we played in Houston, and I just remember having this moment where I'd like loaded a couple things in and I was doing something, and I turned around and realized like I think you had single-handedly unloaded the rest of the trailer, and I thought, this is a marked difference between Drew and I that I'm already.
I think I was doing the same thing, but from a different angle. I was going, why am I? Oh, maybe I should let my people do it. I learned from Dave. I was like, I don't have to do everything.
So you're from Memphis.
Uh-huh.
You grew up in Memphis. As with everyone that I know that is from Memphis, you are a very proud Memphian.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's one of the most underrated cities of all time.
I agree with that. I have no pushback. So when you're growing up, when is the first time that you would say that you got the bug for doing what you do now, being an artist, being a singer-songwriter?
Yeah. I mean, I started playing music when I was probably like in the 7th grade. I got a guitar, started taking some lessons. That was kind of a train wreck. Honestly, I didn't really love the lessons. It was sort of a classical situation.
Okay.
I was like, nope. And I was like, I just want to learn how to play songs, man. Like, and he'd be like, okay, bring me a song. I remember taking in like Garth Brooks, The River. And the guy was like, you could tell he was just like, I can't believe I'm spending my time teaching this kid how to play this song. So I ended up stopped taking lessons and had a friend. It was a really good friend who was a great musician. And we would sort of get together and just play like, random songs. And that was probably 7th, 8th grade. By 9th grade, I was good enough to kind of like lead Young Life.
So what are those songs? What are the songs y'all playing?
Oh, I mean, we were playing, a lot of Jack Pierce.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
The Vineyard and Rain.
Oh my god!
And then it was a lot of worship songs.
Yeah.
I could "Sing of Your Love Forever" and play the song for a million years in a row.
I've never heard a more appropriately titled song.
I know it's like the worship song that never ends. So yeah, it was like, and then a lot of Young Life stuff. So it was like I was learning like Bob Seger songs.
Oh wow!
Like "Against the Wind" and then Van Morrison. So, but I didn't even contemplate music as anything more than a hobby really until college. I mean, I went through a sort of personal tragedy, lost my brother when I was 17. And that summer, my musical taste pivoted from like, grunge rock towards like singer-songwriter. Because I mean, most of high school, I was like more into Pearl Jam and Rage Against the Machine than I was into like Van Morrison or David Gray. But then that all sort of flipped for me that summer. And it was really Van Morrison, David Gray, Dylan, stuff like that. So,
and why was that? Why do you think that changed?
I don't know. I think just the temperament of grief, sort of like I was more sad than angry, and I didn't need like, I don't know. It just like Rage Against the Machine wasn't doing it for me. It's like,
it's hard to grieve.
Yeah. I was like, I'm not angry at the man. I'm just like
right.
sad. So, and also too, I learned to play those songs easier because it was like, they translated, if I learned a Van Morrison song on me and the guitar, it sounded like more like a Van Morrison song than if I learned like a, alt rock song on the acoustic. And it's like, yeah, it sounds nothing like the recording.
It sounds like a much more wussy version of that song.
Yeah, for sure. But then I didn't take it seriously. I didn't really write a song until my junior year of college.
Oh, wow.
I never had really aspirations of being an artist until the sort of second half of college.
So what changed? What made you want to do
Well,
that?
I went and studied abroad in Scotland, and while I was
What
there,
was your name?
Hey.
Whoa,
Her name was Edinburgh.
Eddie, sweet Eddie.
Sweet Edinburgh. So I started writing songs over there, mainly just out of curiosity. And sort of, I had started my senior project, which was it was an oral history about my brother.
Oh, wow.
So the songwriting was sort of my like escape or my, I don't know, sort of what the right word is, but it sort of helped me get through all that. It helped me sort of make sense of it. And I was also sort of dealing with sort of a little bit of a heartbreak. That's where a lot of good songwriters start.
Oh yeah.
Like the girl that, won't pay attention to you. Who is my wife?
Hey. You know what I love about that is, to clarify, you didn't say the girl that got away. It didn't even get to that. It was
she didn't
the girl
get away.
that wouldn't pay attention to you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because the one that wouldn't pay attention to me did not get away. I eventually got her really intoxicated one night. Now we've been married for 15 years.
Yeah, and isn't that just a classic story? Who doesn't know that?
Who doesn't have that one?
That's a well-worn path here.
That's a joke, everybody. That's a joke. I don't condone that behavior.
Oh my gosh. So you come back and you've got some songs under your belt. And is that the beginning of you going like, should I play some shows? Should I maybe record these?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I came home with some songs, and I had an old friend who was a producer. I met him as a kid. I bought my first car from him. He was a music producer in Memphis at Ardent Records.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know you bought a car from him.
Yeah. This old 71 Jeep. So we'd sort of stayed in touch a little bit.
This is Paul, right?
Yes, Paul Ebersold. And so he was at Ardent Studios. He had just built his own place. He'd left Ardent and built his own place in East Memphis. And, my dad, being sort of the curiosity rainmaker that he was, he's like, you should call Paul, and tell him you're playing songs. And so, like so many people do with producers or artists, I was that guy and was like, hey, Paul, I got some songs. And he's like, great. He's like, well, come into my studio for an hour and sing them into a microphone with my assistant engineer, and I'll listen to them later and tell you what I think.
Oh, wow.
And so he calls me like a month later, I'd just gone back to Knoxville and starting my senior year. And he's like, he's got this sort of like Southern accent, kind of talks to his mouth like this a little bit, and he's like, Drew, I was just getting ready to call you before I listen to these songs and just tell you not to do it because nobody should do it. It's stupid. Nobody makes it. And he said, but I listen to these songs, man. And it's got this like Steve Earle, Tom Waits, Dylan thing. I'm not saying you're like them, but I can hear them in your songs. And man, you should probably think about maybe giving this thing a go.
No way.
Yeah.
You got like a stamp of approval, like someone that's very legitimate. Because Paul, for those who don't know, Paul had done Three Doors Down. He had done
Sister
Jen
Hazel.
Blossom, Sister Hazel. A extremely successful and sexy producer. But to have that's a massive deal.
No, it's a big deal.
To start a career with someone with that kind of reputation sort of giving you the nudge is a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I went back to Knoxville because I said, what should I do? And he said, well, you're finish school. And at the time my plan was to go to graduate school and try to be a history professor, seminary professor or something like that. And he said, well, go back to school, try to play some gigs, around town, which I didn't even know how to do that. And then he offered me a job working at the studio when I graduated. So that sort of became the new path. And so I played 5 or 6 shows that fall in Knoxville at random venues in town and get my friends to come. And then I got the second stamp of approval was a lot of my friends were like, when you told me you were doing this, I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. But these are actually, you're pretty good. You should, maybe there's something to this.
Isn't that funny? I don't know if you've had this experience, but when people ask me, especially really young people, like, to your point, college kids or people right out of college, like, hey, I really think I want to do this. Do you have any advice? It's so funny you say that because one of the things that I say, play your songs for your friends.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's weird because you'd think it'd be the opposite. You think friends would be like, oh man, it's great. Do whatever you want to do. But if they're really your friends, they're probably going to shoot straight with you. Mm-hmm. And if your friends genuinely like it, you're probably on to something.
Well, for sure, because they already can like kind of see through the heart part of it, and they know whether or not you're like you're doing it for the right reasons or whatever. Right. I did have one friend. This is like hilarious and sort of embarrassing. He came to see me play one time, and then I invited him a second time, and he's like, we weren't super close, but he lived across the street from me. I mean, like, across the hall from me, and he said, "Yeah, man, I'm not coming again. It's just not my kind of music."
Okay.
And I was like, okay, well, I know where I stand, you know?
There's no wondering. I mean, no, one of the hardest conversations I ever had in my life is when I moved to Nashville. I had a roommate that was a kind of an acquaintance of mine from MTSU. And I'll never forget one night, he had a couple, and he was just like, man, are you sure this is what you should be doing for a living? Because he worked in the music biz. And I just remember thinking, okay, he's like, I mean, I think your songwriting's gonna be, he's like, man, I just don't know. Like, you really feel like you're like vocally, and I was just like, that was my Michael Jordan moment. I was kind of like, oh, I will show you.
I'm going to score 50 on you in the second quarter.
That's right. And so after college, you get out, you start playing. So one of the things I wanted to ask you was this. What was the goal? Like, did you have something you're like, okay, this is, Yeah,
I did. My initial goal was there was sort of a series of venues in Tennessee, New City in Knoxville, Third and Lindsley in Nashville, and the High Tone in Memphis that I wanted to be able to headline. I was like, if I can do that, then I was sort of like, that's it. That's my goal. And that felt like a very tall mountain to climb at the time. And the New City and the High Tone happened relatively quickly, probably within like 18 months.
Yeah, that's insane.
You know,
that's really fast. Because those venues are, I mean, Third and Lindsley at the time was what, 400?
What was the old Third and Lindsley? So I think it was like 270 or something like that.
Okay. And the High Tone's about the same?
High Tone's about the same. Yeah, 250.
Yeah.
The old
That's
High Tone.
a lot of people, man.
That's a lot of people. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it took me probably to headline. It probably took me 18 months to sell out. Probably took me another year, 2.5 years. So when people are like, did you like dream of selling out the Ryman 2 nights in a row? And I'm like, yeah, right. I don't have any sort of even like remotely close to having a dream of that sort of scope.
You know, and this may be too bold, so forgive me and correct me because I know you will if this is wrong. But I say this a lot about Nashville people. I don't know a lot of friends who moved here to play music to sell out the fill in the blank. I know a crap ton of people who are like, I just want to play music and make a living playing music.
Yeah, like definitely.
I think people think it's like sports or business that way, where it's like, well, why would you not get into it if you didn't think you could sell the ramen out? It's like, well, first of all, it's a complete crapshoot. I mean, it's the crapshoot of all crapshoots. But then second, you just want to get out and play. You know, I just don't know a lot of people who really, and plus you just can't control, like it's got to be one of the careers. It's got to be the hardest to actually affect any real control over.
Yeah.
It's so crowd dependent.
Totally.
And so I think people can misunderstand that because, you know, which I think this is a whole other conversation, but I also think it speaks to how confusing it can be once you actually start to have success in this business, because I don't know a lot of people who actually thought they would.
Yeah. Totally. You know, how to manage it. And also too, I think for me, there's such a steep learning curve on how to write songs and then how to record songs and then how to sing and then how to sing live and then how to put on a show. I mean, there's all these things that as a fan of music, when you start making, like you decide to become an artist because you were influenced by artists and you loved the way that it sort of helped you sort of color the black and white world that is
for
there,
sure.
You know, so, but you don't have the language or the skill to know even how to name what that thing is. And so as you're learning and growing, I feel like that was in some ways has probably been the most satisfying part of the whole journey is sort of learning these languages, learning music, learning songwriting, learning singing, and being able to put those things all together to create a sort of magical moment of a recording or a sort of particular show or tour that sort of communicates the way you want it to communicate. So I think it took me, like, my real goal, I think, of trying to do music was to like make something that I was proud of. And I think that took me longer than I wanted it to take. Because I didn't have any of the skills or language or knowledge, and I was totally flying by the seat of my pants.
Which isn't it? This is something that's always been so fascinating about your marriage, is what you just nailed. I mean, you have who is beginning a new tradition in a family of a music making. I mean, you know, you and Ellie are both music makers, you know,
right.
But Ellie's pedigree is music making.
Right.
Yours is nowhere near music making. So it's interesting that, to your point, you would come up in this Southern family, wonderful parents. I mean, incredible family, but you're not musical. It's not in occupation, at least. I mean, I know they love music, but then Ellie, you know, who is a Bannister, her dad is one of the most successful producers in Nashville, maybe the most successful producer in Christian music of all time. So that's a well-worn path in the Bannister family. And so you get married to this girl who has got to be such a blessing in a lot of ways because of that, you know, because this is a language she speaks better than you do. Right. And she understands it. There's nothing you haven't explained to your wife of like, this is what this looks like as a career. And so my life may look like this, you know, she knows it very well. So how has that been? What is that dynamic, especially early on in y'all's marriage and dating? Like, what was that like being suddenly, you know, in as you're rowing?
I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, I was just thinking, you know, like, I don't think I understood the difference between pitch and tone until I'd already made like 2 records.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? Like, she's like, your pitch is off. And I'm like, I don't understand. What does that mean?
You're like, this isn't baseball.
She's like, I feel like your tone's kind of weird there. And I'm like, well, you mean I'm not hitting the note? You know? And she's like, no.
Yes.
Oh gosh. You know? And then I remember a particular moment. Her family also, they all are sort of creative, and a lot of them are songwriters. Not necessarily professionally, but they all, you know, a couple of them are. And then one of her brothers works in a church and he writes songs. And then Carly's an artist, her younger sister.
They're all so stinking talented.
Yeah, they're all really talented.
All of the siblings.
So I remember I played a song, The Wine We Drink, for one of her brothers. And I was just playing it for him. And I played it and he's like, hey, so, that's cool. But what if you change? And I was like, hey, I wasn't really looking for like an assist. Song's finished. I love it. I'm recording it just as it is. And that was a lot of our dynamic together too, was she's much more collaborative, and her family tends to, one of their love languages is like sort of honest critique. That is not one of my love languages when it comes to my songwriting. And so I would write a song and I'd play it for her and she'd be like, huh, that's interesting. And I'm like,
oh dear.
Okay. Okay, cool. She's like wanting me to ask her why I think
you're like, anyway, what are we eating tonight?
Yeah. And I'm like, cool. I love that song. It's finished. It's done. And then the best moment ever on that front was I wrote, she and Nathan, we've been married for, I don't know, maybe 5 years. And she and Nathan, our guitar player, were working on a Christmas song in our sort of music room in our old house. And they'd been in there for like, slaving after the song. And it was one of those that just was not coming easy. And this is the night that I wrote Live Forever in the other room.
Oh, wow.
In like 14 minutes. I mean, it was like one of those songs that just kind of came, right? So I played the song for them. And this particular time, Ellie was like really just undone by the song. She loved it. She was just like crying. You know, it was about our nieces and nephews. So it was sort of personal for both of us. But then after Nathan left, she's like, I do have one thought, if you don't mind. And then by this point, she had learned to kind of like couch her. Yeah. So she said, that line, like, play on children like it's Christmas Day, just doesn't really like resonate with me. And I was like, that's my favorite line of the song. And then so she drops, speaking of her dad, she drops the, she had always dropped her dad as like, well, we should ask my dad about that. And I was like, you want to ask your dad about it? She's like, yeah, actually I do.
Oh, shot.
And so they come over for lunch or something a couple of days later, and I'm like, hey, can I play this new song? And so I play the song, and he's over there. He's just like, wow. And he goes, oh, that Christmas Day lyric is my favorite.
And
I just looked at Ellie and I was like, that's what I'm talking about. The brown seal of approval has swung in my direction.
That's amazing.
I am now a professional too.
That's right. You just remarked. So one more question, then we'll get to the hot takes. You know, I think about you, and we talk about your pedigree and growing up in Memphis. How do you think that's influenced your writing and your music? Because it's such an insanely musical town.
It is. It's a very musical town. There's so much history. There's so much sort of genre collision.
That's a great way to put that.
That's happened there. I'd say the biggest thing is sort of a little bit psychological, or sort of just a sort of streak of independence.
I love that.
Sort of grit, kind of do it your own way. The biggest thing I sort of fought against in Nashville and still fight against is like sort of seeking perfection in the studio. The Memphis way is much more of like, you want it to be raw. You want it to be human. It's why Bruno Mars went to Memphis to record some stuff, because he just wanted that sort of like raw in the room authenticity. Yeah. And I've always tried to keep that with me. At first, I don't think it was necessarily like I even knew that that's what was going on, but Memphis people just have sort of whether it's musicians or athletes or anything, there's sort of a chip on their shoulder, sort of feeling like, us against the world kind of thing. So, but honestly, like musically, I didn't even know necessarily what was Memphis and what wasn't, because I grew up like every other kid in the 80s and 90s listening to, oldies radio, and I didn't know what was Motown and what was Stax. I didn't know what was Muscle Shoals or what was, LA as far as recording went. But I did know that, music was revered and respected in Memphis. I think Nashville's obviously has that. There's other towns, but a lot of towns, music is not like a respected part of the sort of local culture. And so music was respected. And so even when I told people I was going to do music, it wasn't like some alien idea. Right.
Yeah. It's a part of the vernacular.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was, I remember when Annie and I got married and she moved here, like within, I think, a week, she had ran into somebody at the grocery and they're talking, and she asked, well, what's your husband do? And he's, he plays music. She's like, oh, great. Is he gigging? And she was like, I mean, I just can't have this conversation in Jackson, Mississippi.
No.
I think her grandmother still
like frog gigging.
Yeah. You can have that conversation. But I think your grandmother still to this day is like, is he out with prostitutes and snorting lines of coke at every show he plays? And like, if you saw these venues, I'm more apt to have too much coffee than I am too much cocaine.
Yeah.
Like, it's very, not really.
Speak for yourself, Dave. Really.
Touche.
Yeah.
Touche. So speaking of, let's get into the hot takes, Drew.
Let's
start this party. So what's a hot take one? I'm ready.
Hot take one.
Okay. Hot take one. I'm going to do sort of all my hot takes are a little bit sort of best and greatest.
I love that.
So I'm going to start with one. I think Willie Nelson is one of the greatest jazz singers of all time.
Ooh, I love this. Continue.
Okay. So, obviously Willie's like revered as a songwriter, revered as sort of a country artist, but I've been spending a lot of time recently just listening to him sing, and the way that he phrases and the way that he climbs in and out of melodies is absolutely unmatched. Like, it's as good as any of the great jazz singers, Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald. And I started thinking about him as a jazz singer, and it's made me appreciate and love his music by like a multiple of like 2 or 3x.
That's incredible. What made you think about that? Like, was there
trying to sing with him on stage?
Oh, yeah. Not many people can answer with that answer, by the way.
Yeah. So we were, we did this tour with him, and they said, hey, you get, he always does this medley towards the end of the show. And it's, I Saw the Light, Will the Circle Be Unbroken? There's one other one that I'm forgetting. And they're like, when he starts it, just go up there. There's a guest microphone. He knows you're coming up. And so, it's like, instead of, I wondered, so aimless life, it's like, I wondered, so aimless life. And you're like, where are we going?
Like chasing kittens on stage.
Dude, it's unbelievable. And it's similar with his guitar playing too, obviously.
Yes.
But all of a sudden I was just like, man. And then one of my favorite songs is Kermit the Frog's Rainbow Connection. And I was looking for other versions of that to sort of like, I was like, I wonder what this song would feel like if it wasn't like a fake frog singing it.
Yeah.
You know? And so Willie's is like one of the top ones that came up. And I was like, he's a jazz singer.
Yeah.
This is like unbelievable.
He sort of lives outside of time.
Oh,
the way he performs it, but Stardust, that record for those who are listening, and I think is as much a testament to your hot take as anything. That record randomly was a record I grew up on. My dad had that record, and it is. So first, to agree with you, I'll say one, that record proves your point if nothing else does. Like, even if you don't ever listen to another song he ever sings, that record, which is basically a jazz standards record.
Yep.
He absolutely slays. He sounds so normal, and, you know, he doesn't sound like me doing a jazz record. It sounds like a jazz guy doing a jazz record. But, but two, you cannot write the song crazy. You can't write that song. And those melodies are some of the best melodies of all time. They're really jazz melodies. Truthfully, that song is like
jazz standard kind of stuff.
So which Willie Nelson wrote, "Crazy," you know, that Patsy Cline made so famous. Those melodies, you don't. A normal person doesn't write that song. Like a country songwriter doesn't write that song. You know.
Other sort of side note on Willie, he was basically only as far as success goes. He didn't have a successful record until he was in his 40s.
Jeez.
I mean, Red-Headed Stranger came out when I think he was 43 years old. And before that, basically everything he'd ever done had kind of commercially tanked. And so he goes and makes like the most weird, you know, sort of, it's basically a book, you know, it's like this, you know, it's not like a standard classic record at all. He just basically did this, you know, the word is escaping me. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And then everybody thinks of him now as like, oh, he's just been a legend for all these years. And it's like, well, he's actually only been a legend since he was in his 40s.
You know, fun fact, who else is like that? I think Bonnie Raitt's Nick of Time, I think, came out when she was 40. She had tons of records, tons. You could look it up.
Wow.
And good records, like you'll listen to them.
Yeah.
But that record was the first one. I mean, it won a Grammy. It sold 2 or 3 times platinum. It was a massive record. Don Was produced it. But yeah, she was definitely at that. So why do you think, why is that not still the case anymore? Do you think?
I mean, I don't know if that's true. Chris Stapleton.
That's true.
You know, I mean, so I think it's still possible. I just think that, I mean, I think Willie Nelson was probably still an exception in his time.
Yeah,
too.
that's probably true.
You know?
Yeah. It feels like these days if stuff doesn't.
I haven't made my biggest record yet.
Get in there,
Dave.
Drew. Get in there.
I don't know if you want to know that yet. Hot take number 2.
All right, segue and hot take number 2. So you know, you sort of speak to this with Willie, how he's dabbling. You know, I think of anybody that I know in music, and this is my own hot take that I'm adding to yours, but I don't know that I know anybody with fingers in so many pies as I do Drew Holcomb. You know, I mean, you are such an incredible. No, I think it's incredible. You're such an entrepreneur. But to me, you're like one of the guiding sort of like what you can do in 2020 as an artist. You know, you're sort of one of the archetypes for that to me. You know, you have Moon River Festival, which is just such an incredible thing. You guys have grown that. You know, you and Paul Steele, your manager, have just grown this thing. Now it's in Chattanooga. It's this massive event with humongous names. You know, I saw you're part of this new bourbon, you know, which is so cool with Peyton Manning and all of these other, and it's called Sweetens Cove. Yeah. Bourbon. You have Moon River, you have Magnolia Record Club, you have the headliner golf, you know, trips that you put on. I mean, and I guarantee you've got 2 cooking right now and nobody even knows about. So what is that about you? Like, what is that? What's that thing?
I don't know. I think more than anything, it's just curiosity and a high tolerance for risk
and pain.
And pain. And certainly pain. I don't know. That old adage, like, you know, there's nothing you can, if you're going to bet on something, bet on yourself, you know? It's also just fun. I like building things. I like sort of the creative process, the vision of an idea and seeing it sort of take on reality. Yeah, but it's exhausting, honestly. And some of those dreams, you know, for every one you've mentioned, there's others that failed or didn't end up being as good of ideas as I thought. I mean, Ellie's funny because she's like, I need you to go on the road, but I also need you to come home, but don't be home too long, because when you're home for too long, you come up with another idea, and then that's just exhausting. So
has the pandemic been good or bad for that?
You know, it's actually been good for that. I think for the first time in a long time, I'm taking stock of just the reality that time is like the one asset that is limited, that you can't get it back. And so I've enjoyed some of the forced rest and honestly enjoyed some of the forced hustle, but I've really enjoyed the time at home.
Which is funny because I say that in this, in this pandemic, you've started kitchen covers, this bourbon has come out in this pandemic. And so it's just proof to how much, your engine sort of idles at half.
It does idle about 3,000 RPMs.
Yeah, that's right.
What'd you do today? Nothing. When you say nothing.
Yeah, you're nothing and my nothing.
What do you mean? Yeah.
I've always thought that was amazing about you.
Yeah, I do idle pretty high. I mean, I learned that from my grandfather. I grew up 5 doors down the street from my grandfather, and he didn't believe in like work and rest. He believed in work and play.
Oh, wow.
And those are, and I have that sort of mentality. I don't really rest very well. I play hard.
Yes. Yes.
So that's my rest, is to play.
Yeah. It's cool. And I think for those who are listening, that think about what we do these days, I think, again, Drew, you do such a good job of this, but I'll never forget, a friend of mine called this about a decade ago. She said, she said, I think in the future, in the next 10 to 15 years, it's not going to be artist. You guys are going to be slashers. And I was like, what's a slasher? She said, well, like singer / songwriter / bourbon owner, I think that's true. And I think for people who are coming in this career right now, you're seeing so many artists, humongous artists to brand new artists that are really doing such a good job of slashing, of kind of,
Yeah.
And I think the best thing about that, in my opinion, is, I've just found that everybody I know that does this has some hidden other creative superpower. Like I was interviewing James Bay the other day, and James is this incredible artist, drawing. I mean, I think about, Bo Reinhardt, Bo is an insane. And so it could be in writing, it could be poetry, it could be painting, Cockrell's been doing these paintings,
carpentry,
like any of these
Kiefer,
kind of, exactly. Yeah. And you just kind of feel like the great thing about doing music, one of the hard things about doing music in 2020 is that, there's not the money there used to be. Streaming is making things good in some ways and really difficult in other ways. But one of the great things that I think that forces us to do as creatives is you actually get to be a creative. You can, like you're doing so well, where it's like your entrepreneurial skills you don't have to squash those like you may have 30 years ago, because all you would have been doing is touring, because that's all you had time for, and making records. Now there are these chances to do other things that you've done so well, so it's kind of encouragement to those. So what's hot take 2?
Hot take 2. Best male vocal performance of all time.
Oh, Drew's coming off the top rope. I can't wait to hear this.
Percy Sledge, When a Man Loves a Woman.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's hard to push back on.
So I was watching whenever he got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I can't remember who got in that year. It may have been U2. There was a lot of like hoopla about sort of whoever the main act was, and I think it was U2, and they did a great job, and the accolades and everything were well deserved. But then he gets in and he does When a Man Loves a Woman, and his wife's on the front row, and he's like, at the time, like maybe like mid late 70s, and he sings the song in this like wherever they are, whatever venue they're in, 5,000 people. And he does not take his eyes off of his wife the entire
gosh.
And she's weeping and standing up, and and the whole crowd is, and he's just getting after it. And I didn't know at that point who he was.
Wow.
I mean, I knew the song, because of Michael Bolton.
That's right. Oh, Mikey B.
Oh, Mikey B. Who? That's a great.
I was going to say, he's no slouch.
No slouch. But I went back in and then I got into this argument like we all do with each other, like what's the greatest male vocal performance? And there was like all these good options, John Lennon's Twist and Shout, I think is like one of the greatest of all time. And, et cetera, et cetera. And then I was like, what about Percy Sledge, When a Man Loves a Woman? And everybody in the band was like, yeah, that's probably it.
You can't, you really can't argue that.
Yeah. And a lot of people haven't heard it. So that's why I want to say it out loud.
Yeah. You need to hear it. You haven't
heard it. People need to go hear.
That is the great centrifuge, in my opinion, of what the song is about, is being communicated by the vocal. And that may sound crazy to people because isn't every song that, but it's not. You can have great singers sing a song without really expressing the song's intent. And when that guy is singing When a Man Loves a Woman, you are like, somebody in that studio just got pregnant from the vocal take.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Like,
so many pregnancies.
So many pregnancies. I mean, that song he sings. I mean, I was watching Sam and Dave, one of their live shows a couple months ago from back, forever ago. And when they're singing Hold On, I'm Coming, you're like, they're literally about to get in the car and drive a million miles towards something. Cause like they sing with such, and I think Percy Sledge is the same way. When you hear that song, you're like, yeah, you can't, he is leaving it all on the mat. There's no, and especially the lyric, like to your point, like I got to see that clip. I can't imagine what his wife just like, what if
I'll try to find it and send it to you.
What if he found out later that wasn't his wife? You're like, oh, Percy, look at you.
Oh, trouble. Percy's in trouble.
So, we talk about all these things you've done. And then you did this TED Talk, which I thought was so good. Can you talk about that and how that came about and how you chose to speak on what you did?
Yeah. Well, my friend Stephen Kellogg is another singer-songwriter. I know Stephen.
Is the best.
Yeah, he's great. He's up in Connecticut, and we've been friends for a long time. He did a TED Talk, and then after that, he was on tour with us, opening for a tour we did, and I was asking him about it, and he's like, "Yeah, man, you should do it sometime." And I was like, "I don't know. That seems like a scary situation, And anyways, so I asked Paul about it, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll look into it." And so Paul and Samantha figured it out, and the TEDx people in Memphis asked me to come and do the talk. So there was, there's like time limit to it, and you have to memorize it, which is way scarier than playing a show, And so,
because how long is it? 8 minutes?
Well, it ranges. It's like 8 to 15.
Okay.
Is sort of the limit that they give you, and you kind of sign up in advance. So there's a lot of things to talk about. That you can talk about. One of the things I've sort of have strong opinions about is that the sort of face of artistic creativity gets way too much credit, relative to the sort of village that it takes to actually make something happen.
Wow.
Wow. And I've known that through things like obviously touring, but even the festival, the record club. It's just like, my kids are sort of loud. Can you hear that?
Fun, yeah.
Upstairs.
They're having a great
time. Can you hear them?
Yeah. They're starting to bang. Okay.
Yeah, they are. I'm going to tell Ellie to ask them to stop banging on the floor.
Sounds like a Naked Breathe show up there.
So I wanted to talk about, sort of how creativity is a shared endeavor, both from the creation process, but also in the reception process.
Wow.
That, we don't get to decide what the meaning of our work is once it's out there, because it's, that's sort of the beauty of making something creative, is that you do your best to make it, and then you release it into the world, and it may mean something completely different to other people. I've got a song called American Beauty that's about like lost love. And, some advertising person thought it was about being a dad and put it in a Dick's Sporting Goods commercial about being a dad. And now I see it and I think about my daughter, because they paid me well for that. But also, like, it was a really emotional advertisement about a father and a daughter. And I was like, oh yeah, American Beauty,
I mean, that is, I think one of the things that's amazing about that talk is great. And it's called Your Dreams Are Not Your Own. Isn't that right?
Yeah, your dreams don't belong to you.
Dreams don't belong to you. And I think for a lot of people to listen to this, that may be a surprise when you hear that someone would write a song and then, even as your intentions for the song, you sort of release it, and then they come back and you can experience your own song in a different way. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
It's a very real thing.
Totally a real thing. Yeah.
As life changes, you can have an intent for a song, and then some experience happens, or somebody says, some fan can be like, "Hey, have you ever thought about this meaning that to somebody else?" And all of a sudden you're like, "Holy cow, I didn't even think of it that way." And then you sing it and you realize that,
And they can also have it in a funny way. When I first wrote American Beauty, the line was, "She was a good companion with eyes like the Grand Canyon."
Mm-hmm.
I took out the "with" because this is what it sounded like. She was a good companion with eyes like the Grand Canyon.
With thighs.
And I sang it a couple times live like that sort of.
Oh my gosh.
And people were like, it's a beautiful song, but she had some big old thighs, huh?
That's some big sandy thighs there.
AC/DC song.
Oh my gosh. With thighs. Like, I'm never going to hear that song.
Sorry. I just ruined it.
Well, don't you like? I remember Wirtz had some moment where like, oh, John McLaughlin, dude, John needs to tell you the story next time you see him. But Wirtz like one night made a comment about one of his songs about his daughter, and it's a sweet little song. And John was like, "Now every freaking time I sing that song, I try not to laugh at the lyric that Wirtz always mishears." And it becomes like this curse because you're up there.
Totally. You're like trying to be in the moment.
Oh yeah. And then you get to just thinking about Grand Canyon Thighs, can that be the name of our band?
Grand Canyon Thighs.
Okay. What's the next hot take? Give it to me.
Hot take 3.
Okay. I want you to play a little bit of a game with me on this one.
Okay, let's do it.
You can ask me questions. I want you to figure out what my favorite recording of all time is.
Okay.
What particular song, not a whole record.
Okay. Is it in the 70s?
No.
80s?
Maybe late 80s, early 90s.
Okay. Is it U2?
No.
Early 90s.
But where's U2 from?
Van Morrison.
No.
No? Are you saying Europe or are you saying Ireland?
Ireland, yeah.
Ireland. Cranberries?
Close.
Oh God, this is I'm missing somebody and this is gonna drive me crazy. Who is from boy or girl?
Girl.
And it's not the Cranberries.
Since Disgraced.
This is.
She didn't write. I'll give you a couple more hints. She didn't write the song.
Okay.
Someone of much more clout and esteem wrote the song.
I'm gonna be.
But they were both big artists, big stars.
Ireland. She's from Ireland. How am I not knowing who this is?
I'm gonna start singing it to you in 10 seconds.
Okay. No, go.
It's been 7
Oh my gosh, dude!
Days
Sinead and Sweet Prince
since you took your
that song.
away.
All right, talk to me about it.
So that is one of those songs that I feel like I heard as a kid, and I had to like be by myself and just like cry.
Yeah,
I don't even know why.
Yeah,
I was probably I don't know how old I was. 12, 13 years old. And there was this ache, right? Since you've been gone, I can do whatever I want. But there was just something that was just so raw in that recording. And then the simplicity also of, looking back on it now, the simplicity of sort of this ethereal production, this super like trash canny snare drum. But then also like she has this huge raw moments of singing, but then just like nothing compares.
Yeah, it's so stark.
Compares to you. Oh man, I just like I could listen to that song on repeat.
Written by Prince, which is a fun.
Written by Prince. Yeah. Didn't know that until many years later.
I don't think a lot of people did.
I don't think most people know that. Because we covered it the day that he died. We covered it. We were in Omaha, Nebraska, and we wanted to do like a whole thing, but we just, you you don't learn like 3 Prince songs in like an afternoon.
Oh, I don't know if you learned one Prince song.
Yeah, we learned one. It went fine. I think the crowd probably would give it like a solid B plus.
Hey, that's a win, dude.
And the plus was just because it was out of respect.
Yes,
to Prince,
the homage.
you know. But we actually lit the stage purple.
Oh,
and let Purple Rain play all the way through in the dark with just the purple lights on the stage. So, anyways, but yeah, that song, her vocal and just like people always ask me like, what kind of music do you like? And I've started to sort of say, I like music with ache. So I don't care if it's Katy Perry or Robert Johnson.
Wow.
If it has ache in it, it doesn't even have to be. I think ache could be sort of seen as like a sad thing, but it's not necessarily. It's just like, are they singing it because they have to sing it? Like there's got to, that's sort of my litmus test for like a great recording is does it have some ache in it?
God,
and I think that song has the best ache of any recorded moment I've ever heard.
I remember the first time that I heard it and just being, because I actually saw the video at the same time and I was just like, what is this? It's then the video
it's like beautiful. Right here.
And it's just so it's exactly what the recording does. It's like we're just going to get straight to the point.
Yeah,
because her delivery is that's a great. So thinking about you're talking about music. Obviously, you're referring so much music from growing up. That's something I've always felt a lot of simpatico with you on, and is your incredible love of music.
I do love it. Yeah,
and I think and I think this may sound crazy to people. But not everybody that does music full time loves music, and I don't think you have to. You don't have to, You
don't have to, but I think. Well, what's interesting within our band, we have a lot of fights about music, and good fights, like healthy, fun fights. And basically, Rich, my bass player, he doesn't like anything that's been recorded really in the last like 30 years.
I love those guys.
And the thing he hates the most is like new retro soul.
Yeah.
It's like white, especially if it's like a white band.
Yeah.
I mean, he thinks they're great people and he thinks some of them are good players, but he's just like, I do not turn that on around me.
Yeah. Yeah.
He also has a phobia of straws, which is a whole nother conversation.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that about Rick.
So clearly there's other things that need to be addressed.
Maybe you're connected.
Yeah, they may be connected because they use a lot of straws these days when they record songs. Yeah, so we get in a lot of like, but I'm always trying to get him to listen to new music, and he's just kind of like,
he's over it.
He's over it. But then I got him really into Dawes 3 or 4 years ago, and he's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is like, I can get behind this, But yeah, I love music from all sorts of, genres, eras, recording styles. I mean, I think that there's like this never ending Pandora's box that music is. I think one of my like only regrets in adulthood is that like my wife doesn't really like loud rock and roll music, and I could like put on some Zeppelin and like break some stuff, just like
yes.
And every time I'd like to put it on the car, she's like, "What are you doing?"
You're like,
and I'm like, trying to educate our children.
This is about you, Ellie.
It's not about me or you. It's about our children.
Yeah, I think I love that about you, and I think that's one of the things that's so great about your writing, and we'll talk more about this later. One of the things that I love about your writing is I feel like you are always discovering things that inspire and inform your music that you make. I think that's one great thing. If you listen to your records over time, they to me sound like a guy who loves to listen to music.
Yeah. Thanks. That means a lot. I hope that's true. I'm sure, as you know, it's like it's gotten more complicated with kids.
Yeah.
But I've learned to love what they love, which sometimes is, I mean, there's certainly nothing wrong with the Tarzan soundtrack.
Right.
I mean,
listen, I love Phil Collins.
Phil Collins is amazing. And there's certainly nothing wrong with the Trolls soundtracks. I mean, Timberlake and all his cronies making records.
Right.
But I don't find myself with as much time as I'd like to just like sit down with a record.
Yeah.
And, Yeah, I do think that like one thing great about streaming is the discovery part of music is quite a bit easier.
Yeah.
But also the sea of music is sort of overwhelming. Yeah. And then I do think the recording standards have gone pretty.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, yeah, that's a great song. Too bad it sounds like somebody lit a match in the bathroom and recorded it, you know, across the hall. It's like,
I'd love to hear that
while it was exploding.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think for myself, I always tell people, I feel like I'm only as good as the music I'm listening to. You know, like my music is only as good as what's coming in. Like, and I do think for all the trouble that streaming has been, especially in how we're compensated, the thing that I'm eternally grateful for and has prolonged my career is the Discovery Weekly playlist on Spotify. And I guard that algorithm with my life. My wife is always like, hey, hook up our Google account. And I'm like, no. Nobody touches my Spotify account because they have gotten my little sweet spot. And every Monday,
the ship has sailed on me for that.
See, sadly. That's in this, dude. I've talked to some of my friends that had to start a new account because all of a sudden, two things would start happening. This makes me laugh so hard. Two things would start to happen. They'd get on their Discovery playlist. Some new Wolfpack song would come on. They're like, oh, yes, this is what I need. Okay, ooh, what is this? This is cool. And then it would be followed by like the acoustic version of Let It Go. You know,
oh my God.
And then the best, and this is what makes you laugh the hardest, is then there'd be like, you know, 6 or 7 praise and worship songs in a row. Because God bless all of my friends and their sweet wives, but you know, their wives who are wonderful women would be listening to some great praise. But you know, my friends who are like trying to write these, you know, they're getting in there trying to write whatever, and then they're like, I'm gonna listen to new music. They click on the Discovery playlist, and it's like, you know, some children's version of Lord I Lift You. Right after Percy Sledge, you know. It's like,
oh, I can't handle that.
It just doesn't. I mean, it makes me cry laughing. I've literally converted so many of my friends to buying, you know, upgrading their accounts because you can start over. And I checked in with a friend of mine, Dustin Ransom, not long ago, and he's like, dude, it's a whole new world. Like, I don't have to share my account anymore with my kids.
So when we're done with this interview, you're going to walk me through how to do that.
Dude, it will, because literally, man, I can't speak to this enough. Again, for as tricky as that whole place is, and I've got to be careful, but it is incredible how much new music gets brought. I mean, I have a playlist that's just for me called Songs I Like that I started when I started my Spotify account. And all that it is on my Discovery playlist, or when some random music is playing that I've just got playing and I like the song, I hit add to playlist and I put it in this playlist just called Songs I Like. And so it's probably 3 hours long and it's got tons of bands I had never heard of that some of them I'm huge fans of now, you know, and a lot of it is just one song because I'll listen to the rest of the catalog. I'm like, I don't like it as much as that one song, but I love that one song. And it has inspired so much music from me. You know, that was a thing for me growing up, is going to Tower, you know, here in Nashville, going to Tower Records every Tuesday. And I would spend an hour or two at the listening booths.
Yeah.
You know, because that was a vital part of my creation process. And when that whole world started to go away, I was terrified because I thought, I don't know if I'm going to have enough gas in the tank to keep making music. And then thankfully, as you know, streaming has come up, there's just so much music, to your point, you know. And I think people like you and I, you know, it helps because we love music. So you're always listening to music, you know. Okay, so is this the final hot take? Is this 5?
I think I've given you 3.
Oh, give me 4.
Hot take 4.
Okay, I'll do this one's this one can be short. I was just thinking about this the other day. This person made a record that at the time was my least favorite record of theirs.
Oh, wow.
And is now by far my favorite record of theirs. And that is Ray LaMontagne's God Willin' and the Creek Don't Rise.
Oh, yeah.
So when that record came out, I was and am a huge fan of his. So I'm going to say I think it's his best work.
Wow.
And, you know, he had made these records with Ethan Johns, the first 2 or 3 records with Ethan Johns. And I knew Ethan Johns' work from all the early Ryan Adams stuff, and Emmylou Harris, etc. And he went off on his own to make his own record, and it sounds like real roomy, and it's like recorded in this barn up in Vermont, wherever he lives. And at first I was like, man, this just doesn't sound right. This is not the artist. And then I slowly sort of, you know, over years have listened to it more. And now I realize it is like his purest, most Ray LaMontagne-ish record.
Right.
and realizing that sometimes like your first impression of an artist is really colored by the producer, you know? But it also is the record where I heard of and finally understood who Jay Belleros was, the drummer.
Gosh.
And listening to that record, honestly, I think I just love Jay Belleros so much that I'm going to say that he's my favorite sort of session player of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw him live with Mark Cohn years ago. And I remember
oh my gosh,
leaving that show going, first of all, Mark was amazing, but also, and you know, his wife is a bass player, Jay's.
I did not know that.
And so they kind of come as a
Jay's wife or Mark's?
No, Jay's. And they kind of come as a tandem. And
wow.
so they were the band.
See you later, Rich.
I mean, yeah. It's been a good run. It's been a good run. But yeah, it was, and me being a drummer growing up, I was like, that was one of the most incredible, just watching him do what he does. It was incredible. He's a beast.
Yeah. Ian Fitchick had this video. There's apparently Jay does the thing in LA like once a month where it's just this restaurant and it's he and I can't remember who the bass player and the guitar player.
Yes.
And they, you know, no PA, no mics, and they just set up in the corner of this bar and play for like 2 or 3 hours. But they never say when it's going to be. And I'm like, I need to move to LA for a month.
Yeah, just
so I can be ready.
Yes.
For that one night and go listen.
Yep.
Because they never record it. They never announce when it is.
They just go do it.
They just go do it.
Yeah, he's amazing. And Ray is a beast. I'll never forget hearing, God, I don't know if I heard Jolene first. You know, one of Kevin Griffin's hot takes for our hot take episode is that version of Jolene is better than his Jolene is better than Dolly Parton's Jolene.
They're both amazing. But I remember the first time I heard Ray LaMontagne was that song. Somebody sent it to me, and it was back when like you could only listen to, if you didn't buy it on iTunes, the only way to listen to people's stuff was on their website. And so I remember saying, somebody said, "Oh, you can listen to the song Jolene." So I clicked on it. It was like, you know, cocaine flame in my bloodstream. And I was like, what is coming through my speakers? And it also completely eviscerated an argument that I had been making for myself about my lack of success at the time, which was, man, I think my name is hard for people. You know, like Holcomb, people like Drew. How do you spell it? You spell it with an E. And then Ray LaMontagne, no one knows how to say it. You know, just shoots up to the top of the freaking songwriter charts. And I was like, oh, maybe it's just because you got to make better music.
Yeah, I mean, dude. So with that being said, what do you feel like what's the cocktail? I love asking everybody this on the podcast. What's the cocktail that makes up Drew Holcomb? Like, who are the artists that are in that little stew that make up the Drew Holcomb? And it could be, because again, you're a music lover, so this could be 100 people. But I mean, who are the ones?
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, I would say that, you know, I'm just going to fire off like 6 or 7 really quick. Petty.
Yep.
Dylan, Springsteen, Tom Waits, Marvin Gaye, Carole King, the Beatles, Don Henley, David Gray, Ray LaMontagne, gosh, there's so many. U2 for sure. And you said the Cranberries earlier. Those 2 records really, really had a lot of my attention when I was young. There's so many. I mean, Garth Brooks. I mean, I was a big Garth Brooks fan growing up. I didn't really love like regular country music but I loved him. And, but if I had like a Mount Rushmore, it'd be Petty, Springsteen, Dylan, Marvin Gaye.
Of any of those, if you could write one song with any of those, who would it be?
Like an existing song?
Just like if you, I mean, dead or alive, if they were like, let's have a co-write session. Yeah. New song.
Oh, Petty for sure.
For real.
Yeah.
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 What about dinner? If you could have lunch or dinner with one of those?
Springsteen.
Really?
Yeah. I think it's going to happen someday.
You know what? I believe that. I 1,000%. You know,
did you see the Broadway show?
No, I hadn't seen it yet.
I went and saw it 3 times.
3 times.
Yeah.
Oh man, I saw a clip of it, and it was that. Yeah, I was blown away. I just love that he did it. Like whether you liked it or not, just that he was like, "This is what I'm going to do."
Yeah.
You know, one of my friends is from the same area that he's from, and I remember him saying like this was a decade ago, but he was like, "Oh yeah, you see him everywhere." Like you
he's just around.
Yeah, he's around.
Yeah. I've had multiple friends who've had basically like sort of accidental run-ins with him. The best was this buddy of mine's sister does like horse hunter jumper stuff, and Springsteen's daughter used to do that too. So like 7 or 8 years ago, he's watching his sister do this horse thing somewhere in New Jersey, and he sees Springsteen walking. He's like, "Hey, Bruce," and he just kind of gives him the like this and walks on. And he didn't think anything of it. And he said about 5 minutes later, he's like looking this way and he feels someone sit down next to him.
Mm-mm. No,
and he looks at Bruce and he goes, "Sorry, I didn't talk to you earlier, man. I had to go to the bathroom. So what's your name?" And they just had like a 15-minute conversation. Yeah. Crazy.
Oh my gosh. A fun fact about that one, which not to harken back to every podcast we've done, but James Bay, one of his hot takes was we talked about Born in the USA, how it's the same melody that the whole song. That blew my mind. It comes in with the organ or the keys.
Yeah.
Then the "Born in a Dead Man's Town," it's the same melody. The whole "Born in the U.S." I was like, holy cow.
Wow.
Doesn't that mess with your brain?
I didn't think about that either.
I sort of sat there for like, I was gobsmacked on that one. Isn't that crazy to think about?
That is crazy. Also, the thing I love about Springsteen is like there's basically no choruses.
Yeah.
Except for that record.
Yeah.
That record has choruses, but everything else is just like parts.
Yeah. He's just going.
Yeah. He's got like these weird, cool musical parts that all don't. I mean, yeah.
And do you believe anyone in the world more than you believe him?
No, definitely not. Well, I learned from that too. Like my two most popular songs on streaming are probably "What Would I Do Without You" and "American Beauty," neither of which has a chorus.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
It's like you got to write what you believe and let the chips fall, as long as you do it well and with some,
Yeah.
It's just interesting how stanza. My brain is so full of different things now that it used to be. I used to just have such a like McCartney, Beatles, like, structure thing, which is great. And most of my songs are that, but they, there's plenty that aren't. And those are sometimes the ones that people really like
gravitate
latch onto.
Yeah.
Like I think about Tom T. Hall's, "That's How I Got to Memphis."
That's
how I got to Memphis. And it's like, it's not even really a chorus. It's a tag.
Yeah. But it's also the chorus.
But he does it like 9 times.
Yeah.
Because it's like 9 verses.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. Okay. 5.
Hot take 5.
Last take. If I could have anyone's career in music history,
Oh, wow.
it would be Tom Petty's. And here's why.
Okay.
First off, he's Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. They've got some of the greatest records of all time. We'll get back to that in a minute. He was Dylan's backing band for an entire year in 1986. He was in a band with a Beatle and Roy Orbison.
Why do people not talk about the Traveling Wilburys more?
I don't know. It's so good.
Oh my gosh, that music is incredible.
Jeff Lynne.
Oh my gosh.
So good.
So many geniuses.
And then when Rick Rubin did the recordings with Johnny Cash, Tom and the Heartbreakers were the backing band in the studio. So I'm like, he's been in a band with the Beatle, Dylan, and he was the backing band for Johnny Cash and Dylan. He made records, many, many records with Jimmy Iovine, the greatest producers of all time, Jeff Lynne. And then he's made like probably 6 of my 15 favorite records of all time.
Yeah.
So,
and Rick Rubin.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of people they know his career, but they don't know about all this sort of like his side project work is like second to none.
Yeah. I think he, to me, is the archetype. I've talked about this a lot on this podcast. He is the archetype of the simplest version of a thing, writing the most condensed version of something you can write while it's still wildly profound and hooky. He's the GOAT. Nobody touches him from miles, in my opinion.
No.
I mean, his ability.
There are people who've had moments or records that sort of stand up to that standard. But the way he was able to do it consistently through like 3 or 4 different decades, multiple sort of like sonic eras, where it's like, oh, this is cool now. He's not really cool anymore. He remade his sound and became and sort of kept his bullet all the way through.
Well, and it doesn't hurt that his band, I mean, and you have this in Duggar, but like his Mike Campbell, because Nathan's just such a monster freak talent, that's
Yeah,
in
I do.
Duggar. And you know, Campbell's was that for Tom Petty. I mean, when you have this right hand man who is as insanely hooky and gifted, you know, you've just, and then, you know, Benmont and all those guys like Steve Ferrone, you know, now who's been the drummer for the last, whatever, 20 years. You just, I mean, it's like, to your point, it actually goes back to your TED Talk. It's this crazy thing of like, you're not creating music in a vacuum. You know, you're bringing in songs to guys who.
Well, and it goes to your comment earlier about what do people want when they start making music? You know, it's not necessarily that they want to be famous or rich, because there's a lot of other ways to become rich. There's certainly other ways to become famous, but Duggar and Rich, the guys that play with me, and a lot of other great players have played with me over the years behind the drums and the keys and stuff. So it's not just the two of them, but they didn't get into music for anything other than they wanted to make music. And what Tom Petty did so well was he found those guys, and they sort of, he just became sort of the vehicle for all of them to make music over a lifetime together. And the biggest compliment I've ever been paid was Duggar's been doing these series on Instagram where he like talks about a guitar player and then does a solo of theirs that he loves. And he started with Mike Campbell and talked about Petty. And he said, you know, ever since I was like 18, just wanted to play music. And I always loved Mike Campbell. I loved that he had a Tom Petty. And I'm just so grateful that I found Drew. He's my Tom.
Oh my gosh.
And I was just like,
what a compliment.
Like, that's it. I'm done. I retire.
Yeah.
I don't want to retire because I want to keep making music, but I don't need anything else out of this.
That's right.
It's all gravy,
you know? Yeah.
Like to be able to do the things that we've gotten to do together. That's why, you know, Petty is such an idol to me, because he did it. He carried people along with him. Like, you know, they never sort of like lost sight of what he's good at. Like he's just like his photographic lyrics.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Where it's like you can take almost any couplet of his and put it aside and take it out of context, and it's still like ripe with meaning and ripe with energy and ripe with sort of a sense of place and time and nostalgia. And yeah, it's that so good.
And what's, you know, his hits too. I mean, I literally remember where I was. This is so hysterical, but probably 5 years ago, I was driving through 12 South where I live here in Nashville, and Free Fallin' came on, and it was the first time in my life I actually figured out that chorus was saying what it was saying. Yeah, I'm free, free falling. I was like, oh my gosh. Because I always heard it like free was just waiting to eventually get to free falling, but he's like saying, I'm free. And you're like, oh, he's free falling. Oh, that's not good. It was literally the first time in my life.
After hearing it like
a billion times, which is the profundity. Yeah. That's the ninja skill of that guy. That's his whole thing. Is like, oh yeah, you've been singing this, but in 20 years you'll sing that lyric and go, oh wow, that's profound.
Yeah, it's a really sad song.
You know, and you know, which I was going to circle back. You know, that's one of the things John said, McLaughlin said in ours, which I thought was genius. He had a guy tell him one time that every great song or some qualifier, like every, you know, whatever song is a sad lyric to a happy melody.
Elton John.
Yeah.
You know,
I was like, isn't that profound?
So profound,
you know,
so true.
To your comment, or you know, your hot take about Ache. You know, you kind of realize there's something crazy about these songs. You sort of find yourself. Free Fallin' being an incredible example of that. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, dude, thanks for doing this.
Oh, this is fun, man. I've loved this idea since you started doing it. I think it's great.
Thanks. Yeah, we've it's fun. This has been the interview thing has been so fun because I just love hearing, you know, everybody else coming off the top rope. Which you had some zingers there.
Well, this makes you want to like get off and write a song. So that's a good thing.
That's all I can do.
You know.
Well, dude, thanks so much for doing it.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Dave's 5 Hot Takes. Yeah.